For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Simon Bergson. I am the chairman of the Auschwitz Jewish Center Foundation. Both of my parents, Milton and Nadja Bergson of Czechanov, Poland, were survivors of the Holocaust. In fact, they both survived Auschwitz, and incidentally, they met in Auschwitz. Stories and memories. Each year at this gala, we share stories of family members who experienced unforgettable horrors during the Holocaust. And we remember those who were killed and those we never knew, such as my grandparents, my many aunts, uncles, and cousins. But also, we remember those who persevered and survived. The survivors all have their stories of survival. Some are of strength, and some of luck, and some of just being in the right place at the right time, but that's what makes them survivors. I would also like to ask, as Michael did before, I would like this time to ask the survivors who are in this audience today to please stand up and be recognized, and please remain standing. And to prove that we are a group of survivors, I'd like to ask the children of survivors to now please stand up and remain standing. And I would now like to ask the grandchildren of survivors to please stand up and remain standing.
Yeah.
And I know we have a few great-grandchildren of survivors, so please stand up and remain standing. This is great evidence that there were survivors of the war. You can sit down now, please, thanks. The Auschwitz Jewish Center is a unique institution in Poland. The center today serves as a synagogue, as you've heard. It's a synagogue, a museum, and a study center. And it's situated in an original synagogue, one of 32 synagogues, the only one of 32 synagogues that survived the war in the city of Auschwitz, Poland. Or as the Jewish population used to refer to it, as Auschwitz, or as the world refers to it today, as Auschwitz. The Auschwitz Jewish Center educates and offers a variety of programs thanks to the generosity of many of you in this room tonight. The center, along with its cafe, brings young people together of all ethnicities and religions to learn about the Auschwitz Jewish past. And just as an aside, the cafe that I refer to is not a Starbucks, but it is what we call Cafe Bergson, and it's our form of Starbucks. It's the Polish form of Starbucks. The center offers many programs such as the Polish and German police officers program that teaches about the Holocaust and how to deal with hatred. And of course, the American Service Academies program, which we've been running since 2004. This year's class is amongst us. You've met a few of them. And if you haven't already had a chance to have dialogue with them, speak to them. I encourage you to take this opportunity to interact with them. Hear what they are doing and see how this experience adds to their careers. These future military leaders, these future United States military leaders are joining us to learn from the past so they can lead into the future. In order to educate and to affect any change in both the present and the future, we must first learn from the past. This is what differentiates the Auschwitz Jewish Center and underscores its importance. As the son of two survivors, I'm honored to be here with you tonight as we celebrate how we have survived and continue to thrive. We're fortunate to have just heard from Branya, who speaks to so many of the school children who visit the museum and to the cadets and midshipmen every year. Hearing survivor testimony is an invaluable resource. Thank you, Branya. We are honored by your presence this evening. Tonight, we honor someone very special, a fellow trustee and former chairman of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and an all-around accomplished, dignified, and remarkable individual, the Honorable Robert M. Morgenthau. We of course all know that Bob was the longest serving district attorney in New York City, referred to as the boss, and he had an amazing career in justice. You may also know that he was the stimulus for the character of District Attorney Adam Schiff on the TV show Law and Order. But you might not know that he was an executive officer in the United States Navy before his law career began. Bob was in the Navy's V-7 program while he was still at Amherst College in 1940. He then enlisted as an ensign on December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor Day. He served throughout World War II aboard destroyers in the North Atlantic, the South Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and the Pacific Theater, rising to the rank of lieutenant commander. Bob was the executive officer and navigator aboard the USS Lansdale, a naval destroyer, when that ship was torpedoed by German aircraft and hit on the starboard side, wrecking the forward fire room and opening both sides of the ship to the sea. Almost split in two, the Lansdale took a 12-degree list to port. For those of you who don't know what that means it leans 12 degrees to the left. My Navy guy told me that. Despite the increasing list, her guns downed one of the attack planes as it turned away from the ship. 18 minutes later, the Lansdale broke in half. The stern section quickly sank, and the forward section sank 20 minutes after that. While floating in the water, hoping to be rescued, Bob made a promise to himself and to God that if he survived this ordeal, he would live a meaningful life of public service, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather. As Bob puts it, he wasn't in a great bargaining position. Two destroyer escorts, the USS Menzies and the USS Newell, swept the waters from 2200 that night to 0330 the next morning, picking up 234 crewmen, including Bob. Continuing with his service, Bob was then assigned as the executive officer and navigator on a new destroyer mine layer. That ship, the USS Harry F. Bauer, shot down 13 kamikaze planes in action off of Okinawa. The Bauer was torpedoed and sustained minor damage, but was also hit by a kamikaze carrying a 550-pound bomb that failed to explode. The ship held that unexploded bomb for 17 days after battle, a miraculous occurrence. That ship's crew ultimately received the Presidential Unit Citation for extraordinary heroism in action to maintain a seaworthy fighting ship complemented by skilled and courageous officers and men. What harrowing experiences for a remarkable young man who served 4 years during World War II while protecting our country and our freedom. Let's take a few moments to watch a short video highlighting some of Bob Morgenthau's career. Roll the tape, please.
In some ways, he is the incarnation of New York City itself. Heroic, powerful, enduring, resilient. The legendary Robert Morris Morgenthau, a tough exterior with a generous soul.
My father was born in this city in 1919. My great-grandfather, Henry Morgenthau Sr., immigrated to the United States in 1858. Woodrow Wilson appointed him ambassador to the Turkish Ottoman Empire 55 years later.
He used to say I had to wait until I was 55 to enter public service. You know, you don't have to do that. You should go into public service right away.
Bob's father, Henry Morgenthau Jr., was the second generation of Morgenthaus to greatly serve our country.
My father is a very warm, affectionate man. He was an extremely creative, imaginative person, and he had a great sense of humor. I think he enjoyed being with his family more than anything else.
In 1931, my grandfather joined Governor Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration. My dad, age 12, was there. He then served as Secretary of the Treasury under President Roosevelt for 12 years. FDR and my grandfather were very close friends, with homes near each other in Dutchess County. So, as a young man, my father knew the Roosevelts, met their illustrious guests, and even served Winston Churchill a mint julep. As World War II approached, my father understood his duty. After graduating from Amherst College, he enlisted as an officer in the United States Navy.
It was evening, April 20th, 1944. The young executive officer was in the Combat Information Center, just below the bridge of the destroyer USS Lansdale. Suddenly, a massive group of Nazi aircraft attacked. 5 German torpedo bombers hit the Lansdale, and the ship disappeared into the night-black waters of the Mediterranean, carrying 49 officers and men down with it. Bob hung on to life in the frigid waters for hours, not knowing if he would see again the light of day.
April 20 was kind of cold. And I said, if I get out of this thing, I'm going to do something useful. I didn't have a hell of a lot of bargaining power at that point.
Lieutenant Morgenthau, already a hero, was sent to the war in the Pacific, serving on yet another destroyer, the USS Harry F. Bauer. He was aboard during massive kamikaze attacks.
It was frightening, being attacked by Japanese aircraft, and you could set that plane on fire, and that plane was going to keep coming and try to hit you in a suicide attack. I was lucky to get home alive.
After the war, my dad went back to school. He earned his law degree at Yale in 2 years. He was a young idealist with a dream of challenging the old ways. And it was a time for idealists. It was a time for Camelot.
Bob's civilian public service career began after his friend, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, became president. JFK appointed Bob U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. There, he worked with another young idealist, the new Attorney General of the United States, Robert Kennedy. Their fight? Organized crime.
I think we convicted 67 members of the mob. I mean, not low level, but mid-level, high level. I thought law enforcement was very important. I was an idealist, still am.
Bob was brave enough to take aim at the highest echelons, stubborn enough to pursue them, never allowing personal or political consequences to temper duty as he saw it.
We were chasing some of Richard Nixon's friends. I got a hand-delivered letter by the FBI asking for my resignation, but before I could respond, the White House announced that I'd been terminated.
I see it as pure poetic justice that afterwards, my father was elected by the people to serve as Manhattan's district attorney.
For an unprecedented 9 terms, Bob Morgenthau has been Mr. District Attorney. Called a living monument to justice, the boss has run New York County's District Attorney's office with his deep-rooted principles of justice and the rule of law. Under his watch, more than 75,000 criminals per year have been convicted for crimes ranging from rape and murder to corporate fraud, racketeering, and terrorism. Delivering for the boss earns one a wonderful credential, as Justice Sonia Sotomayor knows well.
She was a prosecutor in the Manhattan DA's office, serving under the legendary Robert Morgenthau, an early mentor of Sonia's who still sings her praises today.
President Obama, and for that matter, the United States, should be proud to see once more the realization of that Central American credo, that in this country, a hard-working person with talent can rise from humble beginnings to one of the highest positions in the land.
One of my dad's favorite quotes is, "The price of liberty is eternal vigilance," and he has always been vigilant for all of us.
So much of what Bob Morgenthau has fought and stood for in his life meshed so well with the missions of the Auschwitz Jewish Center. This is why we are here, and this is why honoring a person like Bob Morgenthau is so special. I'd like to call on Mr. Morgenthau's son, Bob P. Morgenthau, on behalf of his father, to accept the Lifetime Achievement Award.
That's it?
This is for you now.
Oh, thank you. Simon, thank you very
I'll hold
much.
this.
You'll hold that. That's very good. Thank you, Simon, for the very kind words about my father. And Branya, what an incredible discussion you gave. What an incredible talk. And you just reminded us why we're here and why we do what we do at this museum and in our greater lives. And so it was incredibly moving and inspiring. I would like, before I jump in, just to give a little more color to the story that Simon told about 17 days with a 500-pound unexploded bomb in the front of the boat. Boat was hit by the kamikaze plane as it broke up, leaving this large cylindrical object. And from the command was sent a munitions expert to determine whether that was a dangerous object. The munition expert said, "Don't worry, it's the plane's engine." And it wasn't until 17 days later that they found out it was an unexploded bomb. Since that day, my father refers to experts as the son of a bitch from out of town. He would love to be here to have told you that story himself and other stories, but having just overcome a nasty flu, he's leaned on one of his other favorite sayings, which is discretion is the better part of valor. And he's recovering. He's can't wait to get back to work, which means for all of you potential donors out there, your checkbooks are not safe. So this evening has a special resonance for my dad because it represents the intersection of two of the most important parts of his life, and that is his military and public service and remembering and honoring the victims of the Holocaust. It has always been his hope that that Venn diagram will launch a better, safer, and more just future for all. If he were here, he would address most of his remarks to the young men and women of the armed forces who are joining us tonight. He would have pointed out that it was only a mere 77 years ago, one day after graduating from Amherst College, that he embarked on his own, although somewhat abbreviated, military education. He was what was called a 90-day wonder, and by the fall of 1941, he shipped out on the first of several destroyers, as you've been told, with the rank of ensign. So, if you will, try to imagine a somewhat more experienced Bob Morgenthau standing here before you while I read the remarks that he prepared for this evening. Changing voices here. It was an honor and a privilege for me to serve my country in a time of war, to serve alongside young men of every walk of life and every part of the country. As a Navy man, I learned to appreciate those in other branches. My destroyers supported the invasions of Anzio, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. At Okinawa, we were on picket station from D6 to the end of the war. We were protected by combat air patrols flown at different times, by fast carrier Navy pilots flying F-6Fs, Marine pilots flying the Goldwing Corsairs, and U.S. Army Air Force pilots flying P-47s. I have a special place in my heart for the U.S. Coast Guard, because those two destroyers that circled and picked up all the men from the Lansdale, including my father, were doing so against strict orders. They turned back on their own. They were manned by the Coast Guard, turned back on their own, saying, "We are not going to let our men perish in the waters." After the war, I went back to school. When I graduated from Yale Law School and interviewed for jobs with top firms here in New York, I explained that I'd made a deal and I'd planned to stay for only a short while and then leave to pursue my true calling, public service. I was promptly rejected by all of them. Finally, a very great man with his own passion for public service Judge Robert P. Patterson, took a chance and hired me at the law firm that today bears his name, Patterson, Belknap, and Webb. Judge Patterson, who'd been Under Secretary of War under FDR and Secretary of War under President Truman, was himself a combat veteran, having served in World War I. I know that military service played a significant role in shaping his worldview, just as mine influenced me. You young service people today will have the honor and privilege of serving your country alongside young men and women from every walk of life and every part of the land. Your character will be forged by your time in service, and you in turn will help shape the character of those who serve with you. By participating in the American Service Academy's program, you are not simply learning about history. You could do that in the classroom. You're going to sites of atrocity and human destruction. You are going to hear from witnesses and survivors. You are going to discuss the moral and ethical consequences of the decisions you will make both as military leaders and as human beings. In your leadership positions, you will understand the importance of history, and you will understand its impact on the future. By being part of the armed services, you have already made a commitment to do something bigger than yourselves. Hold tight to that motivation to do good in the world, whether in government, law, or in a wonderful not-for-profit organization that imparts lessons from the past to create a better future. As you travel to Poland and bear witness to the Holocaust and honor the memory of those who were murdered, you will gather memories and gain insights that will stay with you always. Whether you eventually deploy to a hotspot or on humanitarian mission, wherever you are needed, you will have the same objective: to keep the world safe and human dignity intact. I wish you the very best as you embark on this exciting venture, and I am confident that you will make the best of it and return wiser and better equipped for the many challenges that await you. Thank you.
Sure that Bob gets the award. So as we're moving forward with the program, and maybe to channel Mr. Morgenthau, who will probably, hopefully pick up the phone and call some of you, in the back of your program there are a whole host of different opportunities that you can read about to support the Auschwitz Jewish Center. So we hope as you go home this evening you will think about those and consider joining us to make a difference.